My name is Myra Whitmore. I'm 34 years old, a cardiology resident, and a single mother raising 3-year-old twins on my own. 2 months ago, my life nearly ended after a serious car accident left me in the emergency room with internal injuries and doctors rushing around me. With shaking hands, I called my parents, desperate for help, asking them to watch Lily and Lucas for just a few hours while I fought to stay alive. Instead of concern, I received a cold message in our family group chat saying I was a burden and that they already had plans for the evening. Lying in that hospital bed, I realized I truly was on my own. I arranged emergency childcare at a high cost and made a quiet but life-changing decision to stop supporting my parents financially, something I had been doing for years without acknowledgement. A couple of weeks later, someone showed up at my door, and that moment changed everything. But to understand why, you need to know how this all started. Growing up, I learned early that affection in my family wasn't shared equally. My older sister Vanessa was always the favorite, praised for her looks, her charm, and her dreams, while my own goal of becoming a doctor was brushed off as merely sensible. So I stopped seeking approval and focused on my studies, pushing myself through years of education and training, determined to build a life no one could take from me. When I finally graduated from medical school, it should have felt like a victory, but deep down, it was just another reminder that my achievements were never celebrated the way hers were. My parents showed up nearly 2 hours late, and my mother offered a rushed apology without really looking at me, explaining they had to take Vanessa to an important meeting first because she needed support. There were no flowers, no dinner, not even time to celebrate properly, just a quick photo taken in the parking lot before they hurried away again. I couldn't help but remember how different things were when Vanessa debuted her first fashion show years earlier, when the entire family traveled together, stayed somewhere luxurious, and proudly shared dozens of photos online praising her success. All I received was a brief congratulations and an excuse. I convinced myself it was reasonable, telling myself that her career needed more encouragement while mine was steady and secure, and that I was strong enough to manage alone. What I didn't realize back then was that the imbalance went far beyond attention and praise. It had quietly become financial as well. It began 8 years earlier when my father called asking for temporary help with a payment, and without hesitation I sent the money because that's what family does. But temporary turned into routine, and soon I was covering monthly housing costs, insurance expenses, and every unexpected problem that came up. Even when I was pregnant with my twins and facing that chapter alone, my parents chose to stay with Vanessa instead of being there for me, yet the financial support never stopped. I tracked everything privately, watching the total grow into a number that shocked even me, realizing I had given years of my life and resources without ever being acknowledged. The breaking point came after a long workday when my exhaustion caught up with me on the road, and in a single moment, everything changed. I woke up surrounded by emergency lights, in pain and confused, staring up at a colleague who recognized me instantly, and in that moment, I understood how fragile everything truly was. My voice barely came out as I asked what was happening, and the medic told me I'd been in a serious accident and was being rushed in because there were signs of internal injuries and surgery might be needed. That word alone made my heart race, not because of me but because of my children, since their babysitter was scheduled to leave soon and I had less than an hour to find help. With shaking hands, I called my parents and explained through pain and panic that I needed them to watch the twins for just a short time while doctors treated me. Instead of concern, I heard annoyance, muffled laughter in the background, and then the call ended. Moments later, messages appeared in the family chat, cold and dismissive, saying they had plans and that I needed to handle it myself, followed by a careless reaction that felt like a final insult. Sitting there, exhausted and scared, I realized I was completely on my own. A colleague noticed my distress and quietly handed me his phone, and in those few minutes I found an emergency childcare service, agreed to higher costs without hesitation, and arranged everything needed so my kids would be safe. As the ambulance doors opened and I was taken inside, I understood that something deeper than the accident had changed, and that night marked the moment I stopped expecting help from people who had already shown me who they were. The pain was intense, but not just from my injuries, and lying in that hospital bed with N4 in my arm, I made the clearest decision I'd ever made. The surgery lasted 4 hours, and the doctors later told me my spleen had ruptured and I was bleeding internally, meaning I had come frighteningly close to not surviving. I stayed in the hospital for 5 days, drifting in and out of sleep, monitored constantly, yet during all that time my parents never called, never texted, and never showed up. The emergency nanny service stepped in without hesitation, caring for Lily and Lucas, coordinating smoothly with my regular sitter, and even sending me daily updates that brought me peace of mind. On the third day, I asked for my laptop, ignored concerns about rest, and calmly logged into my bank account, where 8 years of automatic payments stared back at me like a silent record of everything I'd carried alone. I canceled every transfer and blocked every number tied to that past, and instead of feeling sad, I felt lighter than I had in years. Later, when a colleague checked on me and asked how I was doing, I finally answered honestly and said I felt better, not just physically but emotionally free. I knew there would be consequences once the money stopped, but I wasn't prepared for what happened next because 2 weeks later, back home and slowly healing while making breakfast for my kids, a sharp knock at the door stopped me cold, and when I looked through the peephole, I realized my quiet recovery was about to be interrupted. The man at my door had silver hair neatly combed back, sharp blue eyes I remembered from childhood, and a posture that still carried decades of quiet authority, and I immediately knew it was my grandfather, Thomas, someone I hadn't seen in nearly 3 years because my parents always found reasons to keep us apart. The moment I opened the door, he wrapped me in a firm hug, holding on long enough that it caught my breath, then stepped back to really look at me, his gaze softening as it settled on my stomach. He told me calmly that he already knew what had happened, that Aunt Eleanor had called him and explained everything, and before I could say a word, he made it clear I didn't need to defend myself. Instead, he asked me to go somewhere with him and handed me a formal cream-colored invitation to his upcoming 70th birthday, explaining that the entire family would be there and that there were important things he intended to say out loud. As he later sat at my kitchen table watching Lily and Lucas play, smiling as they proudly showed him their toys, it was clear how easily he gave them attention, noting how much they reminded him of me as a child. When I asked how long he'd known about the imbalance in our family, he admitted he'd seen it for years, that he wasn't blind, and that his background had taught him to recognize favoritism and quiet misuse when it appeared. Then he asked if I still had records of the money I'd sent over the years, and when I said yes, every payment and date, he nodded with calm certainty and told me to organize it all, because at his birthday, not to shame anyone but to tell the truth plainly, he wanted the full story brought into the open. Facts, as my grandfather often reminded me from his many years on the bench, have a way of speaking clearly without emotion, and that thought stayed with me as my hands shook around my coffee mug and I admitted my fear that the family might turn against me. He didn't hesitate, telling me calmly that the people who truly mattered wouldn't, and that anyone who did was never worthy of my loyalty to begin with, words that settled my nerves more than I expected. The next 2 weeks passed in a focused blur as I gathered every bank statement and transfer receipt, 8 full years laid out in order inside a plain folder, and seeing it all together was overwhelming, a steady stream of support flowing one way with nothing in return. When Aunt Eleanor came by a few days before the party, she reviewed the records carefully, her face tightening as she reached the final page and said the total out loud, pointing out how much of my life had been quietly given away while I was still labeled a problem. I told her I didn't want to tear the family apart, only to be seen and acknowledged, and she reminded me gently that telling the truth doesn't destroy families, it only ends the pretending they've been living on. Even so, the tension grew when a cousin messaged me warning that my sister was already telling people I'd become unstable since the accident, proof they were preparing excuses before hearing a word from me. By the time I drove up to my grandfather's large, perfectly kept home on the day of the celebration, with my twins chatting excitedly in the back seat and dozens of cars filling the driveway, I knew the entire family was there and that whatever happened next would finally bring everything into the open. Whether they were ready for it or not, I wasn't there to create drama or stir emotions. I was there to calmly speak the truth, with the folder resting quietly in my bag as my proof. The party was already lively when I walked in, with soft music playing, servers moving through the room, and everything polished to look perfect, just like always. I noticed my parents right away near the fireplace, smiling and relaxed, until they saw me and everything about them stiffened in an instant. Then my sister appeared, confident and polished, greeting me with a forced smile and polite words about my accident, clearly downplaying what had really happened. When I corrected her calmly and explained how serious it was, her expression slipped for a moment before she brushed it off and walked away, pretending nothing mattered as long as I looked fine. Not long after, I overheard her speaking loudly to relatives, suggesting I was unstable and cutting off the family for no reason, while my mother added tears and concern to sell the story. I felt the room slowly turn toward me with curious looks and whispered judgments, but I stayed quiet, focusing on my children and refusing to react. That's when my aunt stepped beside me and quietly confirmed what I already suspected, that they had been preparing this version of events for days, trying to weaken my credibility before I ever spoke. And as anxious as I felt, I knew staying calm was the most important thing I could do. I scanned the room and caught my grandfather's eyes. He was calm, whiskey in hand, expression unreadable, but his tiniest nod gave me all the reassurance I needed. I whispered to Eleanor, "I'm fine. Let them talk." The chatter in the room suddenly dipped. Someone clinked a glass and every head subtly turned as Grandpa Thomas stood. Even at 70, he commanded the room effortlessly, the presence of a man who had spent decades in court. "Before we continue with the festivities," he said, his voice steady and clear, "there are a few things I need to say." The atmosphere shifted, every whisper stopped. Before Grandpa could speak again, my father stepped forward, controlled but tense. "Dad, wait," I thought, sensing the showdown about to start. Richard turned to face everyone, every gesture rehearsed for sympathy. "As many of you may have heard, my daughter Myra has been going through a difficult time," he said, sweeping a hand toward me, face full of concern. Mom joined him, handkerchief trembling. "We've only ever wanted the best for her," she added. "But she's been spreading terrible lies, saying we abandoned her." The room went completely quiet. 40 pairs of eyes locked on me. Dad continued, "We've tried to be patient, but it's been heartbreaking. We gave that girl everything." Vanessa chimed in from across the room, smooth and polished. "Everything. She's even claiming we didn't help her during her accident, which is not true. Must be some misunderstanding." A sympathetic murmur rippled through the crowd. I froze. Lily pressed her face into my neck, sensing the tension. The weight of every false word hung in the air, and I knew it was finally time to set the record straight. "Myra," an aunt I barely knew stepped forward, voice gentle. "Honey, is everything okay? Your parents are so worried about you." I opened my mouth, but no words came. Then Grandpa Thomas's voice cut through the room, calm but unshakable. "Are you finished, Richard?" The question was quiet, almost mild, but the steel behind it made everyone sit up straight. Dad's confident mask wavered. "I just thought the family should know," he started. Grandpa didn't flinch. "The family should know the truth. And I intend to give it to them." He walked to the center of the room, every step measured, deliberate, the presence of a man who had spent decades commanding a courtroom. "I've listened to your concerns, Richard," he said, eyes sharp. "Helen, Vanessa, you've painted a clear picture of a troubled young woman who has turned against her loving family." He paused, letting the words settle. "Now I'd like to ask some questions." Dad shifted uneasily. "Grandpa, I don't think this is the place." "This is exactly the place," Grandpa interrupted, voice firm. "This is family, and families should know the truth about each other." He turned to Dad. "Richard, a simple question. Who has been paying the mortgage on your house for the past 8 years?" Dad's face went pale. "What? Our mortgage?" Grandpa pulled a folder from his jacket. "My folder. I have a complete record of bank transfers from Myra's account to your mortgage company. Every month, 96 consecutive months." A ripple went through the room. "That's a misunderstanding," Mom stammered. "We never asked," I said quietly. Grandpa's tone was calm but firm. "I'm not suggesting you forced her. I'm simply stating facts." He opened the folder and began reading. Vanessa's face drained of color. Dad clenched his fists. Mom looked as if she might faint. And there I stood, holding Lily and Lucas, heart pounding as the truth finally surfaced. 8 years. Grandpa Thomas's voice rang out steadily. "Mortgage payments, $230,400. The room fell utterly silent. Even the string quartet had stopped playing. He looked up at the crowd. "That's the house Richard and Helen live in," he said, voice steady. "The house they claim they pay for themselves." A faint gasp rippled through the room. He flipped the page. "Health insurance premiums, $76,800. When Richard's company dropped their coverage, Myra covered the bills herself." Another page. "Car repairs, home maintenance, emergency expenses, around $45,000. He turned another page. "Cash gifts and financial support for Vanessa's fashion ventures, $12,000. He closed the folder. Total, $364,200, give or take. The room was silent, the weight of the number sinking in. Aunt Eleanor stepped forward, voice sharp but controlled. For context, everyone, this is more than most people make in 7 years of full-time work. And Myra did this while finishing her medical residency and raising infant twins alone. Mom's voice cracked, defensive. We never forced her. Grandpa's eyes didn't waver. No one said you forced her. But I have a question. In all those 8 years, how many times did you say thank you? No answer. How many times did you visit her in the hospital after the twins were born? Still silence. How many times did you show up when she needed you? My mother broke down, tears streaming freely now, real raw sobs. Dad's voice was hollow. We thought she was fine. She never complained. She always managed. Grandpa's gaze was steady. She managed because she had to. Because you made her feel like her needs didn't matter. Someone in the back muttered, shaking his head. $360,000. And you called her a burden? Dad flinched as if struck. Grandpa held up a finger, not done. There's one more thing the family should hear. He pulled out his phone and adjusted his reading glasses. 2 months ago, Myra was in a severe car accident. She was bleeding internally and rushed to emergency surgery. From the ambulance, she called her parents. Her children were at home with a babysitter who was about to leave. She needed someone to watch them for just a few hours while she fought for her life. His eyes locked on my parents. This was their response. He paused, cleared his throat. I will read it exactly as it was sent from Helen. Myra, you've always been a nuisance and a burden. We have Taylor Swift tickets with Vanessa tonight. Figure it out yourself. The room went silent for a moment, then erupted in shocked murmurs. Oh my God, someone whispered. Vanessa jumped in, panicked. That's not fair. You're taking it out of context. There is no context, Aunt Eleanor snapped, stepping forward, voice sharp. That makes abandoning your daughter during a medical emergency acceptable? Dad tried to defend himself. We didn't know it was serious. Grandpa's voice cut through the chaos, calm but firm. Did you call her back? Did you come to the hospital? Did you check on her children? Silence. The answer was clear. No, no, and no. A distant cousin moved away from my parents, face full of disgust. Others followed. My mother was sobbing now, raw and unrestrained. I didn't mean it like that, she gasped. I was frustrated. I didn't think. You didn't think at all, Grandpa finished, voice steady, eyes on the room. Not about her children, not even for a moment. He turned to the whole family. I'm not asking anyone to judge. I'm only presenting facts. What you do with them is up to you. Finally, he looked at me, softer now. Myra, would you like to say anything? I hadn't planned to speak. I came expecting Grandpa to let the facts do the talking while I stood in quiet vindication. But seeing my mother's tears, my father's stunned silence, my sister's perfect mask crumbling, I realized I had to. I handed Lucas to Aunt Eleanor and stepped forward, voice steadier than I expected. I didn't come here for revenge, I said. I came because Grandpa invited me and because for 34 years I've been living with a version of my family that wasn't real. A version where I was strong, reliable, and didn't need anything. I believed you when you said Vanessa needed more support, and I tried to be what you needed me to be. But that night in the ambulance, bleeding and terrified, I finally understood the truth. I wasn't strong to you. I was convenient. I wasn't dependable, I was being taken advantage of, and no matter how much I gave, it was never going to make you see me the way you see her. I felt the energy in the room shift as a few relatives stepped closer. An aunt gently touched my arm and a cousin nodded with tears in his eyes. My father tried to interrupt, but I stopped him calmly. I don't hate you, I said, steady but firm. But I can't keep pretending this is normal. I can't keep paying for affection that should never have had a price. Someone across the room turned on him in disbelief, asking how a parent could live off their child while treating her as invisible. My father's voice cracked as he asked if I was happy now, after exposing everything. I shook my head. No, Dad. This doesn't make me happy. But I'm not sorry either, because this isn't about embarrassment. It's about honesty. For the first time in 8 years, the family knows the real story, not excuses or carefully edited versions. Vanessa tried to brush it off, insisting families help each other, and I agreed, then asked where that help was when I was pregnant and alone, when I was raising newborns while studying, and when I was fighting for my life in an ambulance. She had nothing to say. I looked back at my parents and made it clear the money would stop, not out of anger, but because support should be mutual and given with care, not demanded through guilt. My mother reached for me, pleading, but I explained I wasn't disappearing forever, just stepping back to create real space for reflection, accountability, and change. If that day ever comes, maybe something can be rebuilt, but I wouldn't wait for it. As I took Lucas back into my arms, an elderly relative apologized quietly, admitting she'd believed for years that I had it easy. I nodded and said softly that everyone did, because that was exactly how it was meant to look. Let's pause for a moment. That instant when I finally spoke up, when I chose myself for the first time, did it resonate with you? So many of us grow up believing family means endless sacrifice no matter the cost. But boundaries aren't betrayal, and saying no isn't selfish. If you agree, type boundaries in the comments and share this story with anyone who might need to hear it. Now here's what happened after the party. My parents left early without goodbyes, Dad helping Mom to the car while she sobbed, Vanessa trailing behind, eyes down. The emptiness they left was heavy but strangely calm, like the quiet after a storm. In the following days the fallout moved fast. Messages poured in from relatives I hadn't spoken to in years, apologizing for believing my parents' version of events. Cousin Rachel wrote, "I always thought you were the difficult one. Vanessa made it sound like you pulled away for no reason. I'm so sorry I believed her." The family group chat where I'd received that crushing text went silent, then vanished entirely. Gradually, my parents found themselves quietly excluded from family events. No formal announcements, no sides declared, just a slow erasure. By Easter brunch, their names weren't on any invitations. 2 weeks later, my mother called from a new number. I let it go to voicemail after listening once. "We need to talk. This is blown out of proportion. Can't we just move past this?" she said. Forgiveness isn't a reset button. I knew that now. It's something I give for myself, not for them, and I wasn't ready yet. But the financial consequences of setting boundaries were only beginning. 3 months after the party, Aunt Eleanor called me. "They're selling the house," she said. I set my coffee down, stunned. "What? Your parents?" She explained they put it on the market last week, unable to keep up with the mortgage. I should have felt vindicated or satisfied, maybe even guilty. Instead, I just felt exhausted. "Where will they go?" I asked. Eleanor paused. "Your Uncle Frank is letting them stay temporarily, but he made it very clear. It's conditional. They need to get real jobs," Eleanor said firmly. "Not just wait around for someone else to bail them out." My parents hadn't worked full-time in years. Dad retired early at 55. Mom had never had a job outside the home. They'd been living off my money without even realizing how dependent they'd become. "And Vanessa?" I asked. Eleanor let out a bitter laugh. "Don't count on her. Since her divorce and the party, word got around. She lost a major design contract and is waitressing part-time just to get by." I watched Lily and Lucas playing in the backyard, my chest tight. "I don't want them to suffer," I whispered. Eleanor softened. "You don't want them to because you're a good person. But they didn't suffer for 8 years while you carried them. They never grew, never learned. You stopping wasn't cruel. It was necessary." I knew she was right. That evening I opened my new budget. The $3,200 I used to send my parents every month now went straight into a college fund for the twins. No student loans. No carrying anyone else's weight. That was justice enough. Then 6 months after Grandpa's party, my phone rang from an unknown number. Normally I would have ignored it, but something told me not to. "Lyra." Vanessa's voice was quiet, fragile, nothing like the confident sister I remembered. "Vanessa, please don't hang up," I said. She exhaled shakily. "I know I don't deserve your time, but I need to say something." I sat on the edge of the bed. "I'm listening." Her voice broke as she spoke. "I'm sorry. For everything. For the way I treated you, for laughing at that text when you were dying. What kind of person does that?" I waited. She went on, her words small, honest. "And the money, all those years I didn't realize it was you. I thought Mom and Dad were managing." "Did you ever ask?" I whispered. She was silent. "No. I didn't want to know. I liked being the favorite. I liked that it was easy for me. But nothing's easy anymore. I lost that contract. I'm learning the hard way how things really work." There was a long pause, quiet except for the twins' soft breathing. "I'm not asking for money," she said finally. "Or forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I see it now. I see what I was and what Mom and Dad did. I see all of it." I took a slow breath. "Then stand on your own feet. Be better." Her voice cracked with tears. "I'm trying." "Good," I said softly. I hung up, and for the first time in years, I felt something close to hope. 6 months later, and 1 year after the accident that changed everything, I stood in my new apartment watching the sunset through the windows. It wasn't big, 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a small kitchen, but it was 5 minutes from the hospital in a good school district, and most importantly, it was mine. No mortgage payments to people who never appreciated them, no insurance premiums for those who called me a burden. Just rent, utilities, and a college fund for the twins growing steadily each month. Lily and Lucas were at Grandpa Thomas's house for the afternoon. Over the past year, he had become a constant in our lives, picking them up every Sunday for adventures, zoo trips, ice cream runs that I pretended not to know about. "They're good kids," he told me once. "You're raising them right." Those words meant more than I could say. Aunt Ella had become more than family, she was a friend. Twice a month we shared dinners, and she helped me navigate the emotional aftermath of setting boundaries, learning to prioritize myself. "You know what I admire about you?" she asked recently. "You didn't become bitter. You had every right to, but you didn't. What would be the point?" I replied, "Bitterness is just drinking poison and expecting someone else to get sick." As for my parents, we hadn't spoken directly, but family whispers told me they were still at Uncle Frank's. Dad had a part-time job at a hardware store. Mom was doing bookkeeping at a local church. They weren't thriving, but they were surviving. Some days I wondered if they thought of me, missed me, or regretted anything. Those weren't my questions to answer. I'd spent 34 years carrying their weight. It was finally time to set it down. If you've followed my story this far, here's one reflection, not advice. For 34 years, I believed love was something you earned, that if you gave enough, sacrificed enough, and asked for nothing in return, eventually the people who were supposed to love you would see your worth. I was wrong. Love isn't a transaction. It's not a reward for being useful. And learning that truth, that finally choosing yourself is allowed, is the hardest and most freeing lesson of all. And no amount of money, time, or effort can ever replace what should have been freely given from the start. The family I have now, Grandpa Thomas, Aunt Ella, friends like Marcus who showed up when my own parents wouldn't, they love me for who I am, not for what I can do for them. That's the difference. It took almost dying on an operating table to fully understand it. I don't know what the future holds for my parents. Maybe someday they'll genuinely change. Maybe they'll reach out with true remorse, ready to rebuild something real. If that happens, I'll consider it. But I won't wait around for it. I won't shape my life around the hope of something that may never come. My life is mine now, my energy, my time, my love. And if the people who raised you call your self-respect a betrayal, then maybe they never deserved your loyalty in the first place. To anyone out there carrying a weight that wasn't yours to carry, it's okay to set it down. It's okay to put yourself first. You're not selfish. You're not ungrateful. You're not a burden. You're finally free. Thank you for staying with me through this story. If it resonated, please hit the like button and subscribe. It truly means the world. I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to set a boundary with family? How did it change your life? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you want more stories about standing up for yourself and finding your voice, check out the video linked in the description. I think you'll really enjoy it. Until next time, take care of yourself. You deserve it.